Uh, Welcome, everyone. We're just going to wait for a few more seconds to allow all of our families to join us, and then we'll get started. All right. Well, to all of those who've joined us so far, and I know there'll be more joining us this evening. I'm Fanta Aw, and I'm the Vice President for Undergraduate Enrollment, Campus Life, and Inclusive Excellence here at American University. Welcome to each and every one of you. You will be joining us from near and far, and certainly for some of our families who may be joining us from other sort of time zones, we know that certainly you may be and it may be early for you or much later, but we're glad that you could join us this evening. I'm joined by several of my colleagues who are here with me this evening, and I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves first. And then I would like to basically begin our conversation this evening by providing you with additional context for how we arrived at where we are and where we're going. And then we will make sure we give ample time to answer as many of the questions that were sent to us in advance, and some of the questions that probably will come up during this seminar as well. And so with that, I will turn to my colleague, Jessica Waters.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Waters. I'm the Dean of Undergraduate Education and Vice Provost for Academic Student Services. I'm also a faculty member in the School of Public Affairs and what we like to call a double eagle. I earned both my undergraduate and law degrees from AU. I'm really pleased to be speaking with all of you tonight. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jessica. And then I'm going to ask Anne-Marie Powell to introduce herself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anne-Marie Powell. I am the Senior Director for Dining and Auxiliary Services. I've been here at 4 years and, been working really hard to meet everyone. I love meeting the parents and the students when they're on campus and look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Bennett.
Good evening. My name is Matt Bennett. I am the Vice President and Chief Communications Officer for the university. And like Jessica, I'm also a double eagle.
Thank you, Matt. Jeff Brown.
Thanks, Fanta. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Jeff Brown. I serve here at AU as the Dean of Students. I'm in my 3rd year here at American University. Thank you for being here today.
Jean Logan.
Thanks, Fanta. Good evening, everyone. I'm Gene Logan. I'm the director of AU Central. I am a single eagle, an alum of the university. I'm also an adjunct instructor in the School of Education.
Thank you. Ryan?
Hi, I'm Ryan Konauer. I'm the newest member here. I'm the director of housing, and I'm happy to be here to go through this process with all of us.
Thank you. Karen Casella?
Sure. Good evening, folks. Karen Casella. I'm a double eagle. I'm also the director of New Student and Family Programs, and it's so great to see all of you here this evening. Thanks.
Edith?
Hi, everyone. I'm Edith Cook. I'm the Associate Director for Administration in the Student Health Center, and I, too, am a double eagle.
Bernie?
Hi, I'm Bernie Schultz. I'm the project manager for COVID response. I've been in this position since November, but actually I'm a returner to AU, was previously the special assistant to the VP for Campus Life for 13 years. So I'm delighted to be back at American University.
Thank you. Cole?
Hi there, folks. I'm the student web and systems coordinator. So the tech guy tonight. If you have any trouble, please use the Q&A box and submit it below. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you to everyone who are here with us this evening. And this is closed captioned as well. For those who will want to revisit this, know that we will have, this is being recorded and we'll have it posted, so you will have access to it. And for those who could not join us, they'll have an opportunity to have it posted as well. First of all, let me just start with a theme here. You notice as we're introducing ourselves, and I forgot to indicate that I too am an alum and a product of American University. I have all my 3 degrees from American University. As you're looking at the team that is here tonight, you'll notice that 8 of us are also have gotten our degree from American University. This is important because this is not just a place that we work. This is a place that I think all of us would say that it has been a transformative experience during the time that we've been here. And when we've chosen to come back to our alma mater, it is really because it's a place that is near and dear to our heart. And so we very much understand what that experience can be and should be, and are quite committed to that. So I wanted to just preface that. And for our other colleagues who've joined us, they've joined us because they have a heart for this work, and believe in the student experience and believe in the pursuit of the academic experience that our students should have while they're here at American University. So I wanted to start with that. With that said, our agenda this evening is the following. I will briefly talk about where we are and how we got here, but also more importantly, where are we going? I'll have my colleagues chime in, and then we've received a number of questions from you, and we really want to use this time to answer as many of the questions as we can, understanding that some of them are still in development in terms of answers, because we're continuing to monitor closely developments that are going on and are continuing to catch up to those. So we'll have the answers to most of your questions, but there'll be some other questions that will indicate to you we're working on those. But when we tell you we're working on those, rest assured that we'll have answers for those to you, and we'll make sure that we're communicating that as well. So let me first start with because this question has come up. I know that there's tremendous anxiety and there's tremendous, I would say, apprehensions as we start the new year about what does this all mean? Is this really temporary? Is this going to be longer term? And is it just that it hasn't been yet communicated? I want to really take the mystery from that and to basically be, and I'm going to be very direct in saying we are returning on January 31st. That is the plan. That's what we communicated on December 29th. That's what we communicated again this Monday. We are returning for face-to-face on January 31st. With that said, then your question might be, then why are we starting with online to begin with? And there's several reasons for that. We have been carefully, like everyone else, monitoring the trajectory of this virus. And we knew when we saw, in the case of Washington, D.C., that Washington was a hotbed. By the time we got to December 29th, we looked at the numbers, and with all of the science and everything that is there, we knew and understood that this variant had a certain trajectory, and that if we're fortunate, it will be a couple of weeks, and then we'll see it subside. And in other cases, it may take longer. And as we looked at the case count right before we left for the holidays, and then saw the numbers again at the end of December, we knew that it would take several weeks for the city and for the case numbers to come down. Now, many of you would ask the question, but why does that matter, given that you've had a vaccine mandate? And we always understood, and we knew that with the vaccine, what the vaccine as a tool has been incredibly important for us is to make sure that if people do get infected with COVID, that they're not ending up in the hospital, let alone really the loss of life, and that they would hopefully not be also severely ill. And we've certainly seen that much of the data has indicated that. With that said, however, when you're trying to run the academic enterprise at a university, and you want your students in classes and you want them to have that experience, to begin the semester where it is conceivable that a good number of students, because of infections, breakthrough infections, would be missing the first week or two of classes due to a COVID infection, it really does raise the question of how would this really in many ways impact the experience at the beginning of the semester. And so we wanted to make sure that all students started on an equal footing at the beginning of the semester with the least disruption possible. We recognize that online is not ideal. We would have liked to have had face-to-face, but we felt that this was an incredibly important starting point to make sure every student could begin their semester on time and could have the same starting point, so that we can ride this wave of the variant for at least a few weeks so that we can get back together in person, because that is also our preference as well. So that was the first thing. Second, for our students, yes, being vaccinated and with the high level of vaccination that we have, we definitely feel that if students do get an infection, that hopefully they will not land in a hospital or anything more serious. But here's the other reality. As we saw just yesterday, the mayor of Washington, D.C. put out an emergency order until January 26th because our hospitals are stretched. The governor of Maryland put out an executive order 10 days ago because our hospitals are stretched. And same thing with Virginia. And students may need to go to a hospital not because of COVID, but as we've seen, and we have a lot of data around this, students may need to go to the hospital for other things. And knowing the stretch on our hospitals, we also did not want to take that risk and wanted to make sure that our cities would be ready for what may be the need for accessing hospitals and so forth, not for COVID related because the vaccine level is high, but for other related reasons. And that was another reason as well. With that said, we know that it's important for the student experience, and we did open up our residence halls, encouraging those who would like to stay home. Certainly you can stay home for the 3 weeks until you're ready to come back, but also letting our students who wish to come back early, because this may be a better study environment, even though we're online, to have the ability to do so. And sure enough, we've had a good number of students who've returned to our residence halls and are back here and are beginning to use the building for study spaces and so forth. So we wanted to give our students and our families some choices around the residential piece while we ensure that everyone is starting from the same place when it comes to the courses and so forth. So those were some of the things. With that said, we have mandated the booster because we believe that that is incredibly important. And we have asked that the booster be completed no later than February 10th. I am, heartened by the fact that we're getting a good number of folks who are submitting their booster shots. And this is a mandate for students, faculty, and staff. So that is something that I just want to reiterate. With that said, the question has come up again, which is to say, okay, so are you coming back on January 31st? Let me say this again. We are coming back on January 31st. Why? Because between now and January 31st, a couple of things will have happened. The level and the number of folks who would have had their booster shot will be at a much higher level in terms of for health and safety. That's the first thing. Second, also, for those who are not aware, when we first made the decision about coming back, going online, at the time, the CDC had come up with this guideline of 5 days for isolation. And we were ready to go with the 5-day isolation period. However, we have to abide by the jurisdiction. And in the case of Washington, D.C., the D.C. Department of Health subsequently informed universities that they were still on a 10-day isolation until further notice, and we're working actively with D.C. Department of Health to ensure that universities can get to the 5-day isolation period. And in our case, we're recommending that in addition to the 5-day isolation period, that people test out of isolation with an antigen test that we will be able to provide. So that's another barrier that came up, which is the isolation period. But we're confident that by the time we are ready to come back on the 31st, that will be also another issue that would have been resolved in terms of our jurisdiction as well. So our booster shot numbers would have been up. The isolation period would have been reduced, which is incredibly important for the student experience, for those who will still find themselves with infection. We still anticipate that there'll be a high number of cases, but one of the things that we've all come to accept and understand is that we have to know and we have to figure out how to live with COVID in a time of COVID. And we will continue to have the health and safety measures in place to mitigate for as much of it. But the idea that the risk will be zero, that is not where we are. And so that's an important part of our deliberations as we move forward. With that, I wanted to see if Jessica, you wanted to say anything around the curriculum and everything, and then we're going to go through some of the points here.
Sure, sounds great. Thank you, Fanta. Welcome again, everyone. I thought I would address two things tonight. One, the way that we're working with our faculty, and our faculty are working with our students during this 3-week transition period. And that's very much how we're viewing this as a transition period until we're back in person. And then two, talk about some of the academic supports that remain available throughout the next 3 weeks and then for the entire semester to all of our students. So first, during this 3-week period, I think I'll say up front is, for better or worse, our faculty know how to do this now, right? 2 years ago, we had to pivot in the span of 2 weeks and switch to online instruction. And that was a heavy, heavy, heavy lift. This time, when we realized that for the health and safety of our community and our larger DC community, that we needed to make a switch, our faculty were prepared, right? They have done this before and they know how to do this work and they know how to deliver a rigorous curriculum online to our students, right? They've been doing it for 2 years now, on and off. So we have confidence in our faculty that they have the skill set to deliver the classes that we want them to deliver. That said, we are working really closely with our faculty to make sure that that they really understand the circumstances that our students and our families are dealing with. So we sent a note to all of our faculty and have worked closely in the schools and colleges with our faculty to make sure they're thinking through, like, hey, for the next 3 weeks, not all of our students are back on campus. Some of them may be in a different time zone, right? So make sure that we're working with students so they can access material at a time that works for them. We've also been really deliberate mentioning to our faculty that, for example, some of our students may have had books and texts delivered to DC, but they're not back in DC, right? So we've made available services in the library so that faculty can put resources online, recognizing that students may not have their books in person yet. Those are just 2 small examples, right? But it gives you an idea of how we're thinking about these classes. We've also been working very closely with faculty to make sure that we are sticking to our standard academic calendar. So if you go on our website, you can see our academic calendar that outlines all of the important dates for our students and their families. So for example, we are sticking to our January 24th date as the last date to add or drop a class. That's a really important date, right? Because this next 2 weeks is a period where students can add classes, they can drop classes, they can adjust their schedule. Once they get a feel for a professor, they get a feel for their academic workload. They can do that without any penalty whatsoever in these next 2 weeks. They should do so working with their academic advisor to make sure that they are still meeting requirements and making progress toward degree. I often say, as much as we love all of you and love all your students, we really want to get them out the door in 4 years, right? That is our goal. So everyone is graduating on time, taking all the classes they need to take. So if a student wants to make switches in this next 2 weeks, please do so. Encourage your students to work with their academic advisor. After that point, if a student withdraws from a class, a W will show up in the transcript, and also charges remain on the student account if the student withdraws after January 24th. So have that date really firmly in mind. And then the last day for a student to withdraw from a course also remains the same on our academic calendar, and that is March 18th, right? So those are 2 really important dates to keep in mind. That March 18th date is also the date when a student can change a grade type. So a student, for example, could change a grade from an A through F grade to a pass-fail grade, or vice versa. So 2 really key dates that you want to emphasize with your students. As we're talking about this sort of flexibility and working with your students, I also want to emphasize that our faculty are so incredibly committed, right, to our students. The vast majority of our faculty reached out to the students in their classes prior to the start of classes to say, hey, here's what we're doing the next couple of weeks. We know this is a switch. We're going to work together on this. We're in this together. That's the way our faculty are approaching this, right? We are a teaching university, and it shows in the way that our faculty have continually stepped up to meet the challenges of the pandemic. My second point I want to emphasize is that all of our academic support services remain in place. I saw a couple of questions come in about the library. The library is open right now, 9 to 4 every day, 7 days a week. So that is a space for students to go if they need to have some space to get away from a roommate, for example, or to work on a paper, right? So that building is open. And all of our academic support services are 100% available. So academic advisors are all working virtually and able to take appointments online. They're working at full capacity and still meeting the full amount of student need. And that's true of all of our academic support services. So whether we're talking about our writing center, our math and statistics tutoring, our subject matter tutoring, our academic coaching, all of those things remain available. I think the most important thing that students can do right now in terms of their academics is stay really in touch with faculty and stay really in touch with academic advisors. If our faculty know something's going on with a student, if a faculty member knows that the student needs a little extra support, or they're in a different time zone, or any of the challenges they might face, they're really willing to work with them. So with your students, I would say, get in touch with your faculty early and often, and stay in constant touch with your academic advisor to make sure that we're making academic progress over the next 3 weeks and then over the course of the semester. I'm really happy to answer questions as they come in, but really those 2 points I wanted to emphasize.
And going back to some of what Jessica talked about, as we've gone, with online, between educational technologists, curriculum designers and others that are really sort of attached to the faculty and to provide assistance. We also have, like Jessica mentioned, our library is open. Our buildings are open so that students can go and study in those spaces during this time of remote until we get back to face-to-face on January 31st. So those things are in operation. Our shuttle services are back on as we speak. And our gym and rec and fitness center, again, are also back in operations as we speak. So those major operational pieces are there. I do want to also, indicate as to why we made this decision. We knew and we understood that the transmission rate in DC was at that rate, but we also know that this is going to be the entire country. It just so happens that DC was, among the earlier one, and the Northeast corridor has been among the earlier one in terms of the level of transmission. That also means that this affects our staff and our faculty. We have had several folks who've been down because of COVID. And so our ability, as we are seeing this level of transmission, to be fully operational means that, there may be some advisors who may be out a day or two because they've had COVID, and we've had some of those as well. And so I say this in earnest to say, we are not an island unto ourselves. What you're reading about in terms of how this is affecting the workforce, we're seeing that as well here on our campus. Whether it's our custodial staff, whether it is our bus drivers, you can go down the list and we're seeing that. And so we're really working through that as well. And that is another part of the calculations as we think about the first 2 or 3 weeks of classes while we get back January 31st. With that said, we had received a lot of questions. Because you're starting online, are you going to be discounting tuition? Are you going to be discounting room and board? Are you going to be discounting fees? The answer is we're not discounting room and board and fees and so forth. The classes are going. Yes, the modality is online, but it is proceeding as planned. Our residence hall are open and have been operational. Yes, we have encouraged those who wish to stay at home, especially in case that they contract COVID and wants to be at home for that period of time. That is an option, but our residence hall are open, and we've had a good number of people who've come back into our residence hall. Our meal plan is active, and they've started with the meal plan, and they're going to continue to open up more and more of those. And for those who are on the meal plan, the block plan is applicable through the entire semester that the students are here. So those things are in place. With that said, I know that for some of the families, that may not be what you want to hear. And I'm just being as honest as I can be as to where we are in terms of that. This is limited a period. This is not intended to be for 2 months, let alone longer than that. We have this for 3 weeks. We are returning back on January 31st. We're also encouraging those who are waiting until that period of time to come back a little bit earlier, because we really do want to make sure that people get their COVID test. And so we are encouraging folks to take their COVID test at home prior to coming. In case, you find out that you have an infection, you will have your isolation at home. Once you recover, you come back to campus. But that is encouraged, but we know that it's also quite difficult to have access to testing in different parts of the country. But we can assure you that once on campus, we do have the testing infrastructure, and it's been up and running. We've been running our testing center Monday through Friday until from 8 to 6. And then we also have added additional Saturday hours, and we'll continue with those hours of operations to allow for testing to happen. And it is PCR testing. And we're also in the process of acquiring antigen testing, but our standard of testing will be PCR testing for our community. We've also been asked the question of, are you intending to have a testing on a regularized level for screening? Yes, we will be doing that, even for those who are vaccinated and boosted for a period of time as we look at the case counts in the DC DMV area. And as the case counts continues to go down, that will evolve, and we'll be providing additional instructions for how to do that. And we continue with our mandate that those who are unvaccinated, because they have exemptions, will have to be tested twice a week. So those measures will be in place. We will be providing KN95 masks, and we'll have distribution points that will be available for people to pick up a KN95 mask as a member of the community. And that will also be communicated, because we want to make sure that in our classrooms and in our different facilities that we have a better grade level of masking. And of course, the mandate of being masked in our buildings will continue as we proceed. Those are some of the health and safety measures that we have in place as we're getting ready and begin our journey from online to in person. I don't know, Jeff, if you want to talk briefly about, for students and what your office does in relations to some of the work here.
Sure, thank you, Fanta. Hello again, everybody. So I'll touch on briefly what we're doing in case you are a parent or a family member of a student who maybe has contracted COVID real briefly, but we are continuing to work directly with those students. So basically, if a student has tested positive either in our testing center or has self-reported that positive test to us, right now, while we are in this virtual setting, we are communicating directly with the student and letting them know that we are aware of that and that we are here to support them. One thing that we will do is if the student does happen to have one of the very few in-person classes right now that are happening, is if the student reaches back out to us, we will communicate directly to the faculty member so that that faculty member does not expect them in class. Once we move closer to the January 31st date, we'll go back to how we were operating in the past, which was for students who are testing positive, automatically notifying the faculty members on that student's schedule that they will not be able to be attending class in person, and that student should be working directly with the faculty member to make up any work and make up any arrangements for that course. Outside of the COVID world, the Dean of Students Office, we are still operating. We're operating virtually. Students can make appointments with us. Really for anything that a student maybe is needing additional support around, whether it's medical issues, mental health issues, family concerns, whatever it may be, a student can make those appointments with any of the staff in our office, and we will either work directly with that student, or if it's more appropriate for us to refer that student to, say, their academic advisor or disability support or another unit on campus, we're going to link that student directly to whoever the appropriate unit is there. But in a nutshell, we are available. The best place for your student to reach us is through our website. They can generally make a same day, if not next day, appointment with one of our staff members from that site.
Thank you, Jeff. One other thing I wanted to point out, because we've gotten this question quite a lot, and I know there seems to be a bit of confusion around it, and I understand that. So we've had questions about, do I have to have that test, test done before I can come to campus? We encourage that, but we understand that testing is not readily available everywhere. What is mandated is once you get to campus within 48 hours, whether you tested before or not, you would need to be tested. That is a mandate, and that's not just for students who live on campus, it's also for off-campus students. We're asking that of our faculty and our staff as well, as sort of a re-entry testing. So that's one of the things I wanted to clarify. For those who may have contracted COVID, we're asking that you self-report if you're at home. That is incredibly important that you self-report so that we know, because also with our testing and screening that we'll be doing, anyone who would have tested positive for COVID will be on pause for testing for 90 days. And so it is incredibly important that we know in advance. And so that for our testing, that we can make sure we do that, because the reason also for that is that if you don't let us know, and then you go through our PCR testing, it's going to likely test positive again. And with the regulations for Washington and so forth, then you're going to get into an isolation situation. And so it's really important for us to get that information and for you to self-report. And we have the self-report process as well. And that should be there's a link to that as well. So I wanted to raise that because that question has come up. Anne-Marie, can you please speak a little bit to the dining piece, and then Ryan to the housing and what we need people to do if they're going to be coming back for those who have not yet come back, please.
Yeah, so thank you, Fanta, and hello again to everyone. For the dining piece, we actually opened our dining on January 3rd. We opened 2 locations, and we're just, as the population is coming back, opening more. We loaded meal plans earlier for students with their meal swipes and their Eagle Bucks. So it would be there as students started to arrive on January 6th. And on January 9th, we opened TDR. And I know when we hear the concept grab and go for TDR, you think, oh, everything's just plated, and that's how I get it. But I wanted everyone to know that it's actually hot food. We have the stations, we have our GA, we have our home cooked, we have our vegan, vegetarian, We're offering pizzas, we have desserts, they can get drinks, and it's just that they get containers that they can take it out. There's just no seating in TDR, but everything is cooked that day, and we're offering breakfast, lunch, and dinner in TDR. The hours there are from 7 in the morning to 9:30 at night. We then have Subway, and because our Subway location is small in space, and we wanted to make sure we kept everyone safe, it is on a Grubhub order from the university here, and they can come right in, the sandwich is ready for them, and they can go about their way as they normally would. And our convenience store is open. Every week, we're adding new things to the dining program. So as I mentioned, we started on the 3rd. This week for the 10th, we opened up our Aloha Poke Bowls. We're with another location in another building, so we would keep the density that everybody's not crowded together and not trying to have lines. We opened that. On the 12th, we opened across campus our other convenience store that has a built pizza, and we're continuing. Next week, we have opening the sushi on Tuesday. So every week there are 1 or 2 locations opening, with the goal is by the 27th, when we know most of the students will be coming back, getting ready for our opening on the 31st for the first day of classes, all of the dining locations will be available.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Ryan, for housing, for those who will be coming back later.
Yeah, thanks. So an email was sent out to all students that live in the halls, and we gave you a 2-step process, and that was, number 1, please indicate when you're coming back to campus. It was basically an appointment time slot that you selected within this month up till the 31st. We've got overwhelming success with students selecting that. There are a few students out there that haven't, just a couple hundred. So as a group, we've done great. We do ask that all students select a date that they intend on coming back. If you do not know your date, I recommend you just picking the last date available. And then once you determine when you're coming back, you can change your appointment time. We've got plenty of open slots. It's not about slots filling up. It's just that we're trying to make sure that we understand when students are coming back. The second step of that process is once you arrive, you'll go back to the housing portal just as you did for the appointment module, and then you'll indicate that you're here. We just have a little button that you click in the housing app. You can do it on your cell phone and just tell us that you're here. And that's just good for us to know who is exactly here and when they arrived. So those are the 2 things that we're asking that you do, is tell us when you're coming, and when you get here, tell us that you're here. And we've had overwhelmingly great success on this happening. So I just encourage the few of you out there that haven't done that yet. If you haven't, you've received multiple emails from me and you know that you haven't. So I thank you for working so hard on this.
Thank you, Ryan. And also for our students who live off campus, know that we haven't forgotten you. This is why the library is open. This is also why our buildings such as Mary Graydon Center, the School of International Service, the Kogart School of Business, and those facilities are open so students can come and have access to places that they can be and for classes. We also, the Bridge Cafe will be open after the 17th. And so there'll be another location that'll be reopening for students for both on campus and off campus. And again, as I said, our recreation and fitness center also is open for students on and off campus as well. So those facilities are there. And of course, testing is available to everyone, faculty, staff, and students, whether you're residential or not. Those are the things that are available. Isolation housing, we will continue to provide isolation housing for those who are residential students. For those who are off campus, isolation happens in place. One of the things we're doing is we're running multiple scenarios. What happens if you run out of isolation space? Then we'll need to be looking at Plan B. And some of Plan B may be that there needs to be isolation in place, but that we're not there yet. But we'll be running different models of that and to see where we land with those things when we come back and when we're back face to face. Any other things, Karen and others, questions or things that we need to answer based on what you're hearing from the chat?
Thanks, Fanta. There's a few questions, but Fanta, first, I'd love it if you can address sort of like a top line question that we've had, which is, some of our early communication sounded like it was encouraging students to not return to campus. So can you talk through a little bit of this decision to open the halls while we're not having students in the classroom, and how that relates to our decision not to issue refunds or credits for housing.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that, Karen. And so there's really two things to this. One is that when it comes to, again, as I explained, the reason why we started online is to make sure everybody starts from the same place when it comes to instruction. So that knowing how important it is in the classroom to build those relationships from the beginning and the dynamics that happens during the first particularly 2 weeks of classes, we wanted to make sure that the classes were one where you don't have a number of people who are absent and who are starting already with feeling like they're left out as a result of what could happen with COVID, et cetera. That was the primary reason we went online. With the housing, we felt that with the housing, certainly we could reopen housing to a level, but also understood that there would be still cases and lots of cases of COVID. And so we hear from students and we understand the mental health impact of isolation, and therefore felt that we wanted to give people that option. If you wanted to come back on campus because you feel that that's going to be a better environment for you as you're getting started online, then that is certainly available to you. But also if you prefer to be at home because you're going to be online for that period of time, that is available to you. And that also if you did contract COVID and you have to be in isolation for 10 days, that for some people, they probably do better being at home with family in the comfort of their home, as opposed to basically starting the semester and welcome, you're here. And by the way, the first thing you're welcome with is COVID and a COVID infection. And now you need to be in isolation for 10 days.
Thank you, Fanta. So I appreciate that. I think that really helps. Yeah.
This is really important.
Yeah, I know I've also been hearing from a lot of families who were stressed because of all the flight cancellations. So they were worried about how they could possibly get their students to be on campus for a January 10th start date. So I feel like this does give some people flexibility. Yeah.
And we saw that. We saw a lot of cancellations of flights that were taking place, and the anxiety that produces, is tremendous because not all of our students are within driving distance to the university. And so that's another piece of it as well that I think was important. And the same way, again, like I said, it wasn't just flights being canceled. We're seeing schools having problems with bus drivers, with all of these things. And these are all part of what's going on as we're kind of moving from the pandemic to an endemic stage of this. We're seeing that as we start. So really, Karen, it was about providing people options and choices, but also understanding that, particularly when it comes to isolation is a difficult period for anyone.
Yeah, thank you, Fanta. I'm going to ask Dean Waters if we can talk a little bit about, why we're not talking about live streaming classes for the whole semester or trying to continue to do everything remotely. I know we've had these conversations for a while. I know we've tried out some different models. Can you just speak to why we're really just looking at this interim period and not trying to have every class be live streamed for the whole semester?
Sure, it's a great question. We are very committed to the in-person residential education that we offer here at AU. Right, that's what we do, and that's what we do well, and we want to get back to that. This 3-week transition period is just that. It's really important that even though during this 3-week transition period, we didn't just make the decision to stream classes, right? We said to faculty, no, we want you in the virtual classroom. We want you engaging with all of our students. We want that back and forth between students and the faculty member. We want you to have eyeballs on, this is the way I phrase it with our faculty. Like, I want you to have eyeballs on the students so we know how they're doing and we can be supportive as possible in any situation that they're in. So we're really committed to that. I would also say pro tip for particularly our first year students, one of the best resources in your class, whether online or in person, is in a lot of our first year classes, we have embedded senior students. So for example, in an AUX class, you have a peer facilitator. In your complex problems classes, there are peer leaders. Those students not only have gone through AU classes before, but most of them have also dealt with both in-person and online classes. So they sort of have the tricks of the trade of students. So really do utilize that as a resource. When we are back to fully in person, we recognize that there will be some students who will need to quarantine for some period of time. And what we've said to our faculty is we want our classes as much as possible to continue in person. But if a student has to miss class for illness, just as we would in any semester, there are a lot of ways that students can work with faculty and faculty can work with students. So for example, we have guided students to have a buddy in the class, right? Have someone else in the class that you can get notes from. You can call with questions to hear what the discussion was about. We have encouraged faculty members to make their PowerPoints or other presentations available online. We've encouraged faculty to hold office hours, increase office hours, and have office hours at different times, including non-traditional night hours so that students can access them, right? So there are a lot of ways to make sure that we continue that high level of engagement that just pure streaming doesn't get, right? So it's a commitment to the ongoing engagement, discussion, dialogue in the classroom between the student, the faculty member, and then any TAs or peer facilitators that are in the sections.
Thank you, very helpful. Anne-Marie, I'm hoping that you can help illustrate a little bit better for some of our families who've not had the chance to experience all of AU's dining options. There's some questions about like, how might students, especially in this interim, be able to place their order and pick up without having to be online or, you know, in groups? And maybe Anne-Marie, if you can also share a little bit about, you know, like where can students eat? I mean, like, are they literally just like packing a to-go container and then going back to their room, or are there other options in Mary Graydon Center where they can like sit down? You know, what does it really look like?
Sure. So I'm going to take the last part first with the where to sit. There are plenty of places. You've heard Dr. Aw talk about. Students are now eating in Mary Graydon Center. They're sitting up in the tavern. When the bridge opens, they'll be there. You know, so they're eating in a variety of places. There are tables, other locations within Mary Graydon Center. We have a new studies section in Mary Graydon Center that's beautiful with new furniture. I saw students over there today eating and enjoying the space. And you know, so there are a lot of different places for them to eat around campus and other buildings besides Mary Graydon Center. A lot of the resident halls have areas where they can sit and eat too if they don't want to just go back to their rooms. And it gives them an opportunity to talk with each other, to share questions about classes or just what's going on with them. In terms of your other question, in terms of how are they lined? So we've constantly been putting information out for students on, we've been using social media where students are. We also have updated our websites. Students did receive a student guide. And within that student guide, it gave them information of how to go to our websites, where to go to get updated information as we're updating constantly. And our team is also letting people know when you come into, if I go into TDR, oh, you know, this location is open, this is open. So we're constantly providing that information to students as they're going into the dining facilities to eat. And you know, the mobile ordering that we're doing, we had been using that in the spring. It's just now letting people know again that it's there. We're seeing tons of students using it. I'm looking at those numbers on a daily basis. As for any location, we haven't seen any lines. And I literally, as I call it, do drive-bys. You know, I come by late at night. I come on the weekends. So I'm here, you know, I was here Sunday and, you know, didn't see many students in line. I'll be going over there tonight before I leave just to double check and see how I do my walkthroughs too, just to make sure that we're not seeing those lines. And that's why we are opening more dining locations each time.
The other thing, Karen, I just wanted to bring back a little bit is, I want to briefly talk about, you know, we're talking about what's happening right now, and I want to briefly talk about what can you expect January 31st on, because I think that's an important part of the conversation as well. So January 31st is we're back face-to-face. Our students who are residential are in our residence hall. The students who are off campus are in our campus housing. We will be opening up pretty much all of our facilities. On the student, you know, engagement side, we will be encouraging our clubs and organizations to begin to have more face-to-face, you know, sort of meetings and so forth as we proceed. Those things will be happening. Our athletics facilities are already open, and those who are in sports competition are there, with our students being able to go to those, etc. Our rec and fitness, all of those things will be open, and we will be fully operational during this period of time. We will also be making sure that, again, booster shots will be at a higher rate of booster shot, which is key for us. That's an important metric for us as we think about mitigation strategies. And the same way we will be looking at testing and screening that we've talked about with testing. And we'll be communicating that to all of our community members, our students, our staff, and our faculty. And again, as we've said, KN95 masks will be readily available at multiple distribution points for students to be able, students, faculty, and staff to be able to pick those up as they're going to classes and are engaging within the community, et cetera. We will also be transparent about our case counts. We'll have our dashboard back up. It will already be back up starting on Tuesday, even though we are online because we still have folks who are here in the DC area. And so we'll be sharing those things as well. This is sort of where we are. And as Jessica said, our academic calendar has not changed. Our spring break will be our spring break. Those things will remain the way they have, and the same way the end of the semester will be the end of the semester. Because this was the other decision point for us. Knowing where we were and knowing where DC was and the North, the Northeast corridor, et cetera, one of the things that we wanted to make sure we did not do was to delay openings. To us, that is more disruptive than to go with online, knowing that we've done this before, as Jessica said, and our faculty they've done this before. And the resources are there to help them and to support them in that process. But that is where we are with January. And then the student guide will continue to be updated. We'll be using social media quite a lot over this period of time in communicating in our residence hall and our other areas. And so we will also have an operation guide, as I call it, so that people can see very quickly, what are the rules of engagement. And then finally, we were able to get through the fall because the community stepped up and everyone took their responsibility for the health and safety of the community. We will need that even more so when we come back in the spring for everyone to do so. And parents, while I have you here, I'm going to take this moment to also say this. We expect case count to still be up. We don't expect them to be at the level that they are now, but we expect case counts to be up. Our measure will be our level of booster shots in our community as preventive, as sort of mitigation measures. Our measures will be hospitalizations and people being severely ill. And so we will have the dashboard, but that is going to be our key measures as we move into the spring for how we're faring, because it's incredibly important in coming back together as a community that we all understand that case counts still initially are going to be higher than many of us are used to. And as Jeff Brown said, for those students who unfortunately would have contracted COVID, the resources for how we make sure we communicate to faculty during that period of time, how we support students, those measures are going to be in place as we proceed. But I just wanted to make sure to reemphasize how we need to think about expectations. Lastly, Karen, before we go into some other questions, the other thing I want to say here, for many of you who've heard me before, I'm going to say this again. This is an incredibly stressful time for all of us. And we're seeing blood pressure go up for so many. And we're certainly seeing the temperature rise with the type of emails that we're receiving. As I talk to members of the team, we're receiving lots of emails. And I have to say, some of the tone, you can tell from the tone, the level of anxiety and frustration and so forth that is there. And I'm going to plead with each and every one of you. We have got to keep perspective. The sky is not falling. Second, we really do need to exercise grace. Our staff are people too. They have families, they're anxious in the same way that all of us are as we're looking to how we support our students and how we support each other. And so really this notion of how we can be a community and how we can show grace is incredibly important. None of us like the situation that we are in with COVID. We understand that. But as I'm seeing emails and I'm seeing exchanges, I'm seeing the tone, this is not the community that we are. We can be better than that. And so I have to say this in earnest and to say we're all going to have to continue to keep perspective and understand that, yes, this is a challenging time, but yes, we're committed to getting all of our students back. And health and safety is incredibly important to us. It's important for our students, it's important for our faculty, it's important for our staff, and it's also important for our DC community. And so I really would not be able to leave this session without also emphasizing that as I'm seeing the exchanges and things that are going on. And I understand that sometimes you've had a challenge reaching someone, and we need to continue to, address that, and we want to hear from you about those issues. But again, as we said, even for our staff, we have had people who have had to be out because they've had family members who are ill, or they too have been ill themselves. How we support them during that period of time is real for all of us. Karen, I don't know if there were some other key questions there, but I wanted to just sort of, we need to be thinking about how do we think forward? What do we need to do next?
I mean, I thank you, Fanta, for stressing this and helping to sort of reset some of our expectations. I know that, one of the reasons why we've been asking students to tell us about their return to campus plans is just so that we can better plan and predict to meet demand where it is, right? So as things are continuing to ramp up, then students will see it. And we should be back to a pretty robust presence by the 31st. There were a number of very specific questions about testing. And I don't know if we can share a little bit more about like some things, like for instance, if our testing schedule accommodates for on-campus testing on the weekend, since we're asking folks to test in 48 hours. And the difference between whether folks can do like an at-home test, do they need a PCR test? Like if we can just kind of revisit some of those details. And I'll share the testing link in the chat too.
Sure. No, absolutely. And Edith is here, who's been instrumental in supporting us in that area as well. But yes, so we are offering testing on Saturdays. We are not offering testing on Sundays, but we're offering testing on Saturdays. So that is certainly available. And the testing is 9 to 11 on Saturdays. So we are offering testing as we speak. And that will be the case. And yes, we're asking for 48 hours because we assume some folks will come in on Saturday, but then it means that on Monday, they'll be able to get tested because it still will be within that period of time. And it is PCR testing. That is the preferred testing for testing when you get to campus. And so in that sense, we are not recommending antigen testing, but rather PCR testing for when they come to campus, and we'll be providing that. We understand that for those who are at home, antigen testing may be more readily available. And certainly when we're encouraging people to test before they come, they're welcome to use antigen testing prior to coming, knowing that once they get to campus, within 48 hours, we will still be doing testing, and it will be PCR testing. So I just wanted to clarify that, Karen, in terms of the testing and the hours and so forth. And the antigen testing, as we've talked about, if and when we hear back from DC about the isolation period being reduced, then we may consider that in coming out of isolation, that antigen testing may be administered. And we're still finalizing that, but that is not yet fully confirmed. And also, students should not be surprised that once they come to campus and they've done the first 48 hours, that we will possibly have screening, which means regular testing that will be done. It may be every 2 weeks or so, but we'll want to do that as case counts continue to be at the level perhaps that they are. And as we see the level of community transmission that is going on, those would be some of the things that will be in effect when we come back. But we believe that we need to utilize all of the public health tools that are available to us: masking, boosters, testing, good practice around isolation and quarantine, that those are really incredibly important tools, and want to make sure that we continue to utilize those tools. And I also remember seeing on the, on some of the questions, this question about commencement. We are committed to, we know it's important, and we're committed to getting our students to the finish line. There'll be more information forthcoming in due time around commencement and what the protocols and all of that would be, but we know and we're aware that certainly commencement is a very important milestone for our students. And we're fortunate enough that this past December, because we're between waves here, we're fortunate enough that we're able to do our commencement at the time, but there'll be more information forthcoming around commencement in the spring. Matt, Edith, Bernie, anyone else? Jean, anyone else? Is there anything else? Good. And the other thing as well, and let me just say this because the team is here and I can say this, people have not stopped working. I'm just going to say that, you know, and we know why, because we want to make sure we're ready for January 31st. So we're attending to our students who are here. We're attending to make sure that the online goes well. We know this is only day 4, but we are paying attention to all of those things. We do believe and we understand that that experience is incredibly important, and that that time in college is a unique time. And granted that COVID has really made it challenging on so many levels. We are keenly aware of that. If there's nothing else, Karen, anything else?
No, I would just stress to our families who are with us this evening that we've put some of our key resources here on this last slide for you, and I encourage you to visit them. We are continuing to make updates to our coronavirus resources page to answer the frequently asked questions. A lot of those are coming from you. So please know that we do hear you, and then we do our best to make sure that that information and those answers are readily available. I also want to point out the Student's Guide to Spring 2022, because that's where we're really highlighting and featuring the shifts in the services and the hours and how students can access them all in one place. So that's a really great tool to share with your students. And then lastly, you see our link for our website for new student and family programs. Please continue to reach out to us with your questions, auparent@american.edu. And I appreciate your time and attention. Thanks so much for all that you do to support your students every day.
And lastly, for our parents who are with us, you know, thank you. We know these are challenging times, and I just, you know, want to once again express my thanks to each and every one of you. The work that we need to do in partnership is incredibly important, and we know that sometimes it's not easy, but it's important that we continue to stay the course, and that we particularly, you know, begin focusing on not what is right in front of us, but where are we trying to go? And I think again for us, again as I said, January 31st, we expect to see our students back. We expect to see our faculty and staff back on campus. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Stay safe. And to my colleagues who joined us this evening, thank you for taking another one of your evenings, you know, away from your families and to spend some time. Really appreciate all of you spending some time with us today and to help in helping to answer the questions and provide some context. Good night to all of you. Thank you.